Okay, well, hello out there. Firstly, apologies the amount of time it's taken to sort of have an update on this, but we've actually reached a conclusion. It's not quite the conclusion I wanted, but we have made some useful steps forward, and I will explain all. So I'm sitting in the car in question. I've had to move it backwards because I've got another Zoe here and a Kangoo, both which came in for charging issues. And I have actually been really busy with cars, which is great, and that's the bit I really enjoy. And on to the legal case. So firstly, I must say a massive thank you to everybody who donated. I got, in the end, it was about £3,000 in donations, which was absolutely amazing. So massive thank you for everyone who donated. I have to say, legal action of any kind, and this is relatively simple really, it consumes your energy, your thoughts, your time, and money as well. Even with having the donations coming in, the amount of money you're risking, and which is something I've learnt, even with small claims, can be quite concerning. I've learnt a lot through this, and I'll explain what I've learnt, and we have made some useful steps forward if you want to take your own vehicle forward. So firstly, one of the things I've learnt, and obviously for people in Europe, because I know some people in Europe have donated and have contacted me and things like that, what I'm going to talk about it relates to UK consumer law, okay, and UK contract fairness, okay. So yeah, that's just the way it is really. Some may apply to your country and some may not. So small claims costs in the UK. So I used Money Claims Online to raise this case, and cases are not automatically assigned to small claims, okay. So what basically happens is it gets assigned, it's raised as court action, and the court then at some point decides, maybe by asking and sending out questionnaires and things like that, decides what track this case ends up on. So my case initially wasn't assigned to any track, which is important. And if you remember what happened originally, it looked like the other side hadn't replied at all. So I requested a county court judgment, which was, fairly amusing. And I actually got, the court actually gave me that judgment, which was quite cool, I think. Stick that one on the wall. Then the other side actually came back and contacted the court and said, they had replied, but they'd replied right at the limit, at the last minute, and that the court hadn't sort of processed that. And for that case, because of that reason, they got this judgment wiped out, basically. So that's what happened originally, just to go back to the beginning. So the next thing that happened with my case is it gets officially taken over by this law firm on behalf of Mobilize. And they filed a motion to strike out the claim, basically. And whether this is a normal thing, I don't know, but basically this is what they did. And remember, at this point, the claim is not assigned to any track, okay? So there are no limits on costs being assigned, okay? So what they said is the claimant has no real prospect of succeeding, slightly harsh, but and there's no other reason for it to be taken to a trial, basically. So they put that in place, and there was a hearing date set, okay? So a hearing date set to basically review the Mobilize Solicitor's application to have it taken out. What's it called? Anyway, I'm trying to use all the right terms, but I'm not a legal expert, so apologies if I get things wrong. So they applied to have the case cancelled, basically. So when I was talking in the previous video, obviously what I wanted to do was I wanted to have the contract reviewed, and also to update my case to be as good as it can be, and also include any thoughts of the solicitor, the real crux of what's making this fair or unfair. So trying to find a solicitor was really, really hard. Okay, so I would recommend, if you're going to do something like this, don't do it the way I do it. If you need a solicitor, or you'd like a solicitor to review and help you out or whatever, get a solicitor's view. Do that bit first. Obviously, you can use what I'm going to talk about, the results of what my solicitor said. But yeah, get your ducks in a row. Don't do what I did, which is to raise the claim first, maybe, with legal inexperience, and then have the solicitor to review later. So I did latterly find a much better solicitor who was a specialist in motor legal situations. Okay, so kind of like a motor trade specific firm of solicitors, which is fantastic. Like a legal advice solicitor type service. And yeah, massive thank you to Gareth from Newtons of Ashley, who gave me the tip about this legal firm who specialise basically in vehicle motor trade related legal issues. So they were a lot more reasonable on the price and able to provide us with the review of the contract, which is fantastic. Basically, they advised that my claim was a bit thin on the basis, as it stood at the moment, on the basis that it all hinges on whether the fees in the contract are fair, whether fees are listed in the contract or not, and whether those fees are fair. I will give you all the kind of detail of what they advised shortly. But the position I was in made it difficult because I'd not yet suffered a loss. And the way these things are kind of intended to work is that you suffer a financial loss and then you go to court to get repaid effectively. It's not really there for if you're in a really difficult situation and there's no nice ways out. Unfortunately, you have to pay up first and then claim it back later. Okay. So, they did review the contract and give us a lot of information, which I will talk about in a minute, which is really good. But basically, because of the fact that my claim hadn't yet been assigned to the small claims track, so it was just, a court hearing, Mobilize's solicitor applied that I would pay their costs. And so my solicitor, my legal firm, advised that would be their fees, legal fees, so whatever they'd paid to the court. So they've paid a fee to take over the case into their firm of solicitors, and they'd also paid a fee to raise this action. And also their representation costs would be included. So whatever they're charging Mobilize to represent them, they would be looking to claim back from me as well. Okay, and that would potentially be in the several thousand, could be 3,000-4,000. Okay, so it's kind of just the way I'd raised the claim, the situation I was in when I raised it, and the fact I didn't obviously have the solicitor review first of all. So in hindsight, my claim wasn't that well put together, and I was looking at having significant costs. Basically more than people had donated. Another interesting thing is that I've learned is that GoFundMe and things like that is classed as income. Okay, so I have to pay tax on that money that's donated, which is really annoying, but that's how it works. If you raise a GoFundMe for like a charity and the money is paid directly to a charity, then you the charity receive the money directly and you don't pay tax because you're not receiving that money. But because I was receiving the money and using it to pay for solicitor fees, court fees, anything like that, it's classed as income. So unfortunately there was less than the 3,000 available to use for the fees because obviously paying tax on it, which is really annoying. And then looking at obviously having to pay this kind of fairly significant amount. The other thing is I'd heard quite a few people on forums and Facebook and things like that say that their buyout price had reduced, and this is a 2016 car. So it's kind of like 9 years old now, isn't it? So I got a fresh buyout price from Renault because it was 2,053 when I raised this court action, and they came back with 900 2052, I think, actually, 2000. Anyway, it's just over 2050. And they came back with 953. okay? So significantly less. So that, in addition, put me in a really weak position because I'm trying to claim that I'm in an unfair situation, but they're offering me a cheaper way to get out of it. So that makes it really difficult. So with all this kind of in mind, I withdrew the claim, which is really disappointing. But it's kind of, within that situation, you don't want to do it, you know, you don't want to go forwards and risk those costs, you know, looking at it impartially. I think it would have been a bit silly to do so. And I think it would have kind of not been a great use of money people had donated. So I got the contract reviewed in detail using the money that people had donated by this firm who specialise in legal cases, you know, vehicle leases, stuff like that, car-related legal cases, which is really good. So, yeah, on to that. So what did they advise? So what they basically advised is that it all hinges on the fees and charges in the contract and whether those fees and charges are reasonable, okay? And there's a couple of other points as well. And this is what happens, I have to say, when you raise a relatively simple legal case. You've just got piles and piles and piles of paperwork and things going back and forth and legal terms and all that kind of stuff. It's certainly not for the faint-hearted. But yeah, so in terms of if you want to push this forward, or what did the solicitor say, and is this contract fair? So Consumer Rights Act 2015. So right. So this is from the section to do with services. Does it say exactly which section this is from? It says it's section 51. Okay. So, right, so this section applies if the consumer has not paid a price. So in terms of fees and charges, it's difficult slightly because these contracts are a lot of the time referring to, you know, getting like a tradesman or buying, you know, like windows or something. But obviously this is slightly different. But this is the service contract part of the Consumer Rights Act. So, right. So, the contract to be treated, including a term that the consumer must pay a reasonable price for the service and no more. Okay. So, it does go on further to talk about that all fees and charges must be reasonable. Okay. So, there is provision in law for contracts must have reasonable prices. Okay. Right. So, let's bear that in mind. Right. Now, unfair contract terms. Now, if you read the contract from the battery lease contract from Mobilize, so is it fair or not? So it states that there are fees to buy the battery or return the battery, but it doesn't say what these fees are. Okay, and this is really the crux of a potential legal case and whether this contract is fair or not. So this is Competition and Markets Authority unfair contract terms. So this is kind of like an explanation of the law and you know, an expansion on what is fair or not fair. So it says, and this is not every page, this is just certain pages. So consumers should be given a real chance before entering into a contract to see and understand all terms that could operate to their disadvantage. Okay, so you should understand basically what you're getting yourself in for. Should not contain concealed pitfalls or traps. Now, Mobilize will probably say, well, it does say that you may be subject to a fee. Okay, right. All terms should be fair. Right. So simple language and all that kind of stuff. So, right. So, put consumers into a position where they can make an informed choice whether or not to make a contract. Okay, so we must have an informed choice. Okay, so bear that in mind. It also says consumers should be able to foresee and evaluate the consequences of all wording used. Okay, right. Right, so unfair, yeah, so things that are unfair could be imposing a disproportionate cancellation charge on consumers if they decide to pull out of a contract early. Okay, So disproportionate cancellation charges are not allowed. Okay, interesting. And it also talks about disproportionately higher termination charges and over lengthy notice periods. Acting to force consumers to continue with contracts or renew them when they have no wish to do so. They have the potential to be unfair. Okay, so it's very difficult because it doesn't tell you exactly what's fair or unfair. Obviously, there are a lot of contracts, and the fees for returning a battery might be a lot different to the fees for returning, I don't know, a mobile phone or something like that. But it all really hinges on the fact that in the Mobilize contract, the fees are not, in terms of cancellation and returning the battery, are not stated in the contract. Okay, so it says terms allowing variation of the price raise obvious concerns. So they don't really like it where you, or it's not a good sign of a fair contract if all fees and charges, if there are fees and charges which are not stated in the contract. Okay, so that's a sign of a potentially unfair contract. And right, sorry, I just want to look at the previous page. Okay, I haven't got the previous page. Right, and this was a sign of a fair contract. Consumer is given a genuine and practical right to cancel the contract without any sanction or otherwise being worse off, which we obviously don't have. So, right, excessive burdens or requirements to be imposed on the consumer. Wording may be unfair if it could allow excessive and unexpected financial burdens to be imposed on the consumer. Unfairness is much less likely if a consumer has agreed to pay a specific amount in specified circumstances. Okay, so we obviously have potentially unexpected financial burdens, and the unfairness is not removed because we don't have the amounts agreed for particular situations. Okay, so interesting. What the solicitor basically said is that you, when taking out a contract, you as a consumer have a right to make an informed choice. Okay, and so for example, if all fees and contracts are noted in the fees and charges are noted in the contract, then you're making an informed choice because you know in every situation what you're liable for, what you're likely to be paying. Okay, but in these contracts it doesn't say that. Okay, so are you able to make an informed choice? So the solicitor said that if the fees are not stated, that doesn't inherently make it unfair, but the onus is on the person taking out the contract to make reasonable attempts to find out those fees. Because if you can just ask and get the fees, then, or arrange, maybe because it's variable for some reason, then that's not unfair because they've been able to detail what those fees are. Okay? So what I have done today is I called Mobilize, actually called them twice, spoke to two different people, asked them what the fees are to return the battery. They actually both told me initially that you can't return the battery unless it's written off. You can't just give it back to a dealer. I did actually advise them that in the contract it says you can, although it kind of like in the contract it does actually, it goes in one area and then it moves back to another area, so it kind of like moves around all over the place, which I will find just for the sake of completeness and having everything in here. I'll turn this over. Right. So, it talks about early termination, your early termination. If this agreement terminates due to your early termination clause, which is you can tell them you want to terminate by giving them a month's written notice, and you shall return the battery to us. Okay, and you return the battery to us in accordance with your obligations set out in clauses 15.2 and 15.4, and in 15.2 and 15.4, this is where it states your own risk and expense, including any battery removal and restocking fees. So that is the bit where it states this is what the fees are, and this is the fees you're liable for, not exactly what those fees will cost. So I pointed this out to them that it actually says in the contract that you can return it. They went away and came back and said, yeah, okay, you can, but we wouldn't know what that is. You have to contact a dealer. And throughout this process, I've been told that Enfield is my nearest one who can handle this. They are a ZE trained dealership. Spoke to a couple of people at Enfield, so I literally just gave them a call, told them the situation. They've got no idea. So it significantly looks like I am not able to make an informed choice taking out this contract because I cannot reasonably find out what those fees are. Okay. I think the level of the fees obviously has a bearing on whether they're fair or not, because if it was a return fee of £250, for example, because it's a heavy item and it's got to be shipped, then nobody would, really say that was unreasonable. But for them to say that it's £1,500 does not seem like, we were able to make an informed choice, because we can't get any indication of the level of those fees. Okay. So the counter argument to that might be that you've got a choice whether you're taking out the contract, whether to accept it or not. If you don't like the contract, don't take it out. That kind of argument. Now, although that is a point that may well come back, just because you have a choice whether to take it out or not doesn't inherently make it fair. Okay? People might, due to their financial situation, need to get a cheaper car, and the cheaper one may be the one with the battery lease. So there may be other factors, that outweigh certain decisions or affect the decisions. And if the contract is potentially unfair, then it's potentially unfair whether people entered into it or not. The reason you entered into it isn't important. The fact that you did, or the fact that you chose to enter into it, isn't important. Doesn't have a bearing on whether it's fair or not. Okay. So, because the fees are not in the contract, because you reasonably cannot find out what those fees are, is likely to make this contract unfair, in the opinion of my solicitor. But it is an opinion, and it would need to be taken to a court hearing to determine that. Okay. Right. So partly because my claim wasn't very well raised, because of not being kind of fully informed at the start, I suppose, and being able to put those points in the case, but also because this vehicle is older and it has a reduced buyout price. My case turned out really to be very difficult to defend and was risking a lot of sort of personal money over and above what people had donated. Whereas if you have a much newer vehicle, like, for example, maybe a 2018, 2019 vehicle, your battery buyout cost is going to be very significant. And if you are not able to return the battery, whether that's because they keep telling you it's not possible, like they just told me, unless it's a write-off, or you do return it and you pay £1,500 or something like that, then you are in a much stronger position to take this to court. Okay, and the justification basically is, as I've explained, that it is extremely difficult to make an informed choice, and it wasn't possible basically to find out what those fees were, or it was very difficult before you started the contract. Okay, so hopefully that all makes sense. Any questions, please drop them into the comments. I wouldn't have got this far if not for the donations people have made, so a massive thank you again. Hopefully that's useful. It's a shame I wasn't able to push my case forwards, but yeah, as I say, there does come a point where it's a bit silly to continue with it. Really, because I wasn't able to get that solicitor review early on enough, and then to amend the case. And even amending it is more difficult. There are certain rules around amending cases, which makes it a lot more difficult than, it's obviously really easy to raise a legal case to start with, but to amend it, there are a lot of rules around that. So yeah, thank you very much for listening. I know that was a lot of information, but yeah, any sort of comments or questions, drop them in the comments. If there's particular things that I need to ask the solicitor, I can do that, because it's kind of like on a legal assistance. So you pay like an upfront fee, and then they're basically there for you. You can kind of go back to them again. So I can go back further to the solicitor if necessary. But yeah, it certainly has been a pretty wild ride, I have to say. It really, legal action really consumes your thoughts. And I was hoping having the solicitor sort of on my side would sort of take that away, but then you've just got, an extra person to discuss things with, which is really good. You can get legal advice, but it's still really on you to go back to the other side to, sort of make applications to the court. All that kind of stuff is still on you. So it's still quite a burden. But yeah, thank you for watching and listening. And I will catch you on the next one. All right. Take care. Cheers.